Hey guys, I know most often we talk about how emotional abuse affects women, how it impacts women, and in all honesty, it's different. The impact is different in men. And it often goes unrecognized because how you express what's been done to you is different than how a woman expresses it. So I want to talk a bit today, some of the backdrop of how emotional abuse impacts men. So emotional abuse or neglect that happened as a child and how that shapes you as a man. And feel free to clarify it with me. I am obviously a woman and am trying to express what I've seen in my work, in the reading I've done as I've studied people, some of the differences that I have seen in how men express the impact versus how women express the impact in their lives. So when emotional abuse or neglect shape a man's life, especially beginning in childhood, it doesn't just wound his feelings. It trains his nervous system to always be striving to prove himself. It scripts his identity, and it quietly answers questions he may never consciously ask. Because most men are not sitting around analyzing their inner world. They're simply moving forward, performing, enduring. The cost of that forward motion, however, is often carried silently as shame. Because at the core of every man impacted by neglect or emotional abuse lives a single driving question: do I have what it takes? What is different about this than about women, just to throw this out there, is most women are asking the question, am I valuable? Am I beautiful and worth fighting for? Will you come for me? So a man is asking the question, do I have what it takes to come for her, to find the beauty, to have an adventure, and to be great at it? Not as an abstract thought, but as a felt sense that touches everything. Do I have what it takes to matter, to be a great lover, a great warrior, to be strong enough, to be chosen, to be respected, to not be dismissed or replaced? When a boy grows up without consistent attunement, affirmation, protection, or guidance, that question is never clearly answered, and so he spends his life trying to prove it. Men shaped by neglect or emotional abuse are rarely driven by malice or ego. They're driven by unresolved doubt. They're driven to prove they've got what it takes. That doubt often expresses itself as relentless striving and overfunctioning, a deep fear of being exposed as inadequate, difficulty resting or receiving, a need to stay in control of outcomes because, again, he's proving he's got what it takes, and what it takes is measured by outcomes rather than by relationship. So it's not necessarily ambition, other than to call that ambition proving himself. I guess there is a little bit of ego in there, but it's not just to stroke ego. It's to answer that question. Do I have any value to add to the world? It's a survival strategy. So rather than asking, why does this affect me so deeply? Many men default to, I'll just do better. I'll figure it out. I'll come up with a solution. The result is a life built on proving rather than choosing. So how emotional abuse and neglect shape a man internally? You live with the chronic shame of disapproval. Even in the absence of overt criticism, many men carry a persistent sense that they are falling short. Praise feels conditional. Belonging feels fragile. And everything is heard in terms of, you screwed it up again. Any request for change, for looking at things different, look like You screwed it up. Internally, the message may also be, you're acceptable only when you perform. And you're the one that has to figure it out all by yourself. Men who grew up without emotional safety often learn to maximize their own survival experience, but second guess all their reactions. They assume that they are reading situations correctly while at the same time being offended when told that they're not, which creates a lot of dissonance. It's a lot of confusion. You see what's happening, you think you know what's going on, but can't give other people room to call it out differently because that addresses that you don't have what it takes to figure it out. You have a baseline stress and hyper responsibility. Your nervous system stays activated because somewhere early on, responsibility arrived before you were ready for it. You learned to be alert, to be capable and composed, even when you were still a child, because this is how you stayed safe or under the radar. As an adult, this shows up as tension, as irritability, as emotional shutdown, or an inability to fully relax. This is where the dissonance comes in. Or to relax too much because you go offline, you disengage. Emotional detachment is your self-protection. When closeness felt unreliable or costly, distance became safety. So many men learned to care deeply while appearing indifferent, but that care seemed really fragile. At the end of the day, their own self-protection became paramount because they were the only ones caring for themselves. So detachment is often misunderstood as lack of desire or lack of empathy. In reality, it's a boundary built too early and held too long. It's a boundary that was created, a coping mechanism created in childhood that was functional then, but not functional now. Anger is turned inward or sideways. So unprocessed grief and unmet needs don't just disappear. They often resurface as sarcasm, passive resistance, bursts of anger, or quiet resentment that is underlying everything. These expressions are signals, not failures. They point to needs that were never given language. Men impacted by early neglect often develop avoidant or anxious attachment strategies. They have attachment patterns that clearly complicate their adult relationships. This creates relational patterns where love feels uncertain, feedback feels threatening, and conflict feels destabilizing. You may alternate between pulling away to stay safe or moving closer to secure reassurance, but neither feels fully free. You pull away and it builds walls. You move close and it feels suffocating. Neither feels free. So healing begins when you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what is driving me? Some common internal drivers include fear of being seen as weak, fear of being replaceable, fear of failing those who depend on you, fear of discovering you are at your core not enough. When these drivers remain unnamed, they run your life from the background. When they are named, they can be examined, challenged, ultimately chosen rather than simply obeyed. Choosing who you are is not choosing who you had to be. Integrity is not perfection, it's alignment. Authentic masculinity is not about proving strength, but about knowing your strength and limits clearly. As you begin to anchor your identity somewhere deeper than performance or approval, You gain the ability to respond rather than react, to lead without domination, to set boundaries without guilt, and to stay present without armoring up. Many men unknowingly look to relationships, success, or productivity to answer identity-level questions. These sources were never designed to carry that weight. When your value is anchored in God rather than earned through performance, the striving loses its grip. Brokenness explains the wound. It does not define your worth or your capacity. Striving becomes productive when your value is anchored in God, not in the outcomes, which I know sounds dissonant. We are created to be productive. We are not created to have to prove our worth. Most men do not rebuild their inner world alone. Healing often requires a strong, steady voice that can help surface the hidden beliefs, confront the protective strategies, and restore internal authority. This kind of work does not make you passive. It makes you congruent. It helps you to align with who you really are, and that is integrity. So if this resonates with you, it's because these patterns were learned early and carried faithfully. But what once helped you survive does not have to define how you live. We would be honored to walk with you as you clarify who you are and how you want to show up in the world with strength, authenticity, and integrity. Check out our website at livefound.org to learn more about getting connected and setting up a session. And thanks for giving me a few minutes of your time as a woman trying to explain a bit about men. Thank you.